Okay, so welcome everybody to our FTC General Body meeting featuring special guest speaker Lori Meyer. So tonight we're excited to bring you an amazing presentation about TechCom as a career choice and why our roles are critical to the fields that TechCom intersects with. And Lori has an abundance of experience and expertise that she'll be sharing with you tonight. And there will be a brief time for a Q&A following her presentation as well. So please do stick around. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, especially at the end. And we'll be having a time of knowledge sharing and Lori just giving her all of the advice that she can. But before we begin, I'd like to highlight just a few quick announcements happening in and around FTC that should be of some benefit to you as well. So first up, the STC Summit is coming up this summer. So if you'd like to, we have an interest form where we're pursuing university funding for those who'd like to register for the event. Currently, the university is able to provide up to $100 per person towards registering for the summit. So if you'd like to sign up for that, check out our social media and Discord because we have a form where if you'd like to go to the summit, you can put in your contact info and we'll have you as part of that process as well. And that closes next Wednesday, March 31st. And following that, on Thursday, we have a video game night. So if you'd like to join us, just play some games, have some fun with us. That'll be next Thursday at 6 p.m. And outside of that, we recently got news of a temporary tech writing job opportunity from Lockheed Martin that opened up for undergraduates and graduates. We sent that out on our Facebook, email, and Discord. So keep an eye out for that if you're looking for a temporary tech writing job this summer. Applications are open. You can send them directly to the application manager, and we'll be sure to just provide details as they come along. Um, and also, if you haven't already, I invite you to join our Discord server, link up to us on social media, and just so you can follow all our updates. But without further ado, I'd like to give a brief introduction to Lori, who will be speaking with us tonight. So Lori is a technical communicator with over 25 years of experience designing, writing, and editing software documentation and online user assistance. She started her career as a technical editor and is currently the lead writer at a cybersecurity firm in Northern California. She has an MS degree in instructional technology as well. Lori is a member and volunteer for several STC communities, currently serving as president of the Rochester chapter, secretary of the Florida chapter, membership manager of the Instructional Design and Learning Community of Practice, social media volunteer for the Tech Editing Community of Practice, and director at large for the Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and Philadelphia Metro chapters. Lori also serves as the ad hoc member of the STC Community Affairs Committee, and in 2015, Lori was named an STC Fellow. So many accomplishments and a great deal of experience, and Lori will be sharing just a lot of that as in her presentation tonight. So again, without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to you, Lori, so you can start us off.
Okay, thank you, John, and thank you all for joining me tonight. This presentation, in some respects, well, first of all, can you all hear me? Does anyone have any trouble hearing? Okay, good. Okay, I'm just adjusting my mic a little bit here. This presentation, in some ways, almost wrote itself because there are so many things that I've observed over the years and so many terms that have been used and reused and not used anymore that I thought it would be worthwhile just to share some of these reflections with people who are just entering the field or about to enter the field. And I hope this will be a way that we can kind of have our generations connect with one another and learn from one another. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll get into it right now. First of all, you already know a little bit about me. Thank you for the introduction, John. So just, you know, I started my TechCom career after a brief stint as a public relations writer, but I found that TechCom really was a far better fit for me because I like the precision of it. I like the fact that I was helping users do a job. And so it's really been a very satisfying career direction for me. And as I mentioned, I do a lot of work with STC, and that kind of helps buttress my skills in my job because STC has been a wonderful kind of learning laboratory and sandbox where I can kind of make mistakes and learn about teamwork and leadership. So it's really been really good. I have an MS in instructional technology, even though I haven't served in a job as a trainer. This particular course of study was very valuable to me because they covered things like, you know, analyzing your audience, understanding learning styles, all of these things which are actually very important to our work as technical communicators. So it was worth it for me to go through that program. So I'm going to talk about the profession in general and why our value endures in three contexts. One, user advocacy. Two, innovation, quality, and design, and how those terms intersect and sometimes conflict with each other. And number three, the generational differences and similarities that we have and why we have more in common than we might think we do. So first, let's talk about user advocacy. Now, the term usability has been around intensively for about 20 years. The concept of usability kind of gained hold once software technology really started to evolve, because we didn't think much about usability in terms of some of the products that we that our parents and grandparents had used. So you don't think of usability in terms of a television set or a car or riding on a train, but when you're using software to do a job, that's where usability really takes a primary role. So somewhere around 1980 or afterwards, we started hearing more about usability, and we started hearing about testing products to make sure that they're usable and that people can use this tool to get a job done. And actually, out of that, user experience, or UX, has become sort of a subspecialty for technical communicators, because a lot of what we write now is actually embedded in the product. So we've got tool tips and other online visual cues that we writers actually contribute to. So you're going to hear a lot more about UX as a specialty, UX writing. In fact, there's an organization called the UX Writers Collective. And I'm going to have a handout for you, but unfortunately I could not finish it today because I was getting the release out today. So that kind of had to take precedence. But John, I will send you the handout if you want to send it to the distribution list of the next week. So let's look at a couple of statements about usability and about being an advocate for users. Now, you've probably heard this phrase: we are the user advocate, we technical communicators, because we write for users. But I want you to take a minute just to reflect on this statement and see how it resonates with you. Does it seem to make sense to you? Or is there anything about this statement or any of the words in it that don't sound right or that are problematic for you? So just take a minute to think about that. We are the user advocate or advocates. So I'm just going to give you a few seconds here just to think on that, because I'm going to tell you what my interpretation of this term means. So this essentially is true, except there is one word in this statement that I find problematic. It's the word "the." We are the user advocate, because that implies that somehow we care about users and we want to serve them in a way that others may not. I've heard people say, I don't even want to talk to developers because they just don't understand. All they care about is, putting code together and figuring out how things work, but they don't really understand users. Or, maybe managers don't understand users, but we do. We're the user advocate. So what concerns me about that is that there's almost a built-in separation when we think that way. And we don't really want that, because we want user advocacy. I mean, any company or organization should want user advocacy to be everyone's business. Now, the advantage that we have as technical communicators is that we probably are the first or maybe the only people that understand that. And we can be an inspiration to others to be user advocates as well, because developers, even though their focus is, putting the code together and building the product, they benefit if they can have some empathy with the users that they're building for. And we can help encourage that. We can be teachers, we can be, advocates, we can be mentors. We can help other people gain a sense of user advocacy. So I prefer us to say, we are user advocates, and we can encourage that wherever we are. So let's take one other statement here. You've probably heard this before, and you'll hear it again. Know your user, for they are not you. Now, this is essentially true, but once again, take a moment to think about what that might mean, if there's something there that might be missing. For me, it is, they are not you. Now, that's true. We write for many, many types of audiences. For example, we might write for a data entry clerk. We're not data entry clerks. We might write for a flight engineer. We're not flight engineers. We might write for an X-ray technician. We're not X-ray technicians. So we don't play these roles. We don't know those jobs in and out. But there is one thing that we have in common with each of those roles, and that is that we are all users, us included. We use software every day. We use equipment every day, and we have a response to that as users. So what I encourage people to do, every technical communicator to do, is to think about yourself in your user role. Think about the last time that you were learning a new software tool. What was that like? Where did you encounter obstacles? Where did you encounter frustrations? Did you look at the documentation and find that it didn't help you? Did the documentation seem to start right in the middle instead of start in the beginning? Was it too repetitive? Was it inaccurate? All of those things, you'll encounter those things as a user, just as your users do with the products that you support in your role as a technical communicator. So yes, your users are not you, but in a sense they are you. It's just a different you-ness. But you have that common element of experiencing, learning something, having to use it to get a job done. And you can use that experience of your own to gain empathy with the users that you do have to write for. So I would recommend that you start to keep track of what your own user experience is. The next time you have to upgrade a software tool, think about what that experience was like. Where did it block you? Where did it work? And then use that as a learning experience for yourself. How can I take my pain point and prevent my users from going through that same pain point? Or what did this do right that I can do right in my role as a technical communicator? So no, they're not you, but there is still a you-ness that you can bring to this. So as diverse as our audiences might be, we have to remember that we are also users and to draw on that experience. Now, my takeaway from this is that instead of calling ourselves user advocates, we might want to think of ourselves as the first believers. The first believers in making sure that users can be successful, and that the first believers in a sense of being a champion for users. Because in our jobs or in volunteer work or anything else, we might be the first or the only advocate for usability, but we can take that belief and encourage user advocacy among everyone that we work with our teams, with our managers, to help make user advocacy everyone's job. Because I know, like, if I were a CEO in a company, I would want usability to be everybody's job as well, to have that empathy, because the more people who have it, the more successful the products are going to be. So we are the first believers. Now let's talk about three other terms that you're going to hear many, many times throughout your career: quality, innovation, and design. Now, these terms have been around for a long, long time, but their meaning has kind of waxed and waned and changed over the years. And that's been both a problem and an opportunity for us. So let's just take a quick look at some of these. Now, quality, you didn't hear a lot about quality in terms of products. The focus was quite limited until after World War II. And you'll notice that if you study the history of advertising, it reflected a quality emphasis, especially in consumer products and services. And if you have a chance to study some history of advertising, it's really quite fascinating. Because if you look at the post-war years, you'll see how companies actually competed on quality. For example, United Airlines was once known as the extra care airline. Zenith television sets, the quality goes in before the name goes on. Westinghouse refrigerators and other products, you can be sure if it's Westinghouse. Borden's, if it's Borden's, it's got to be good. So all of these products sold on quality. We are the best. And so quality really meant something to the people that were selling the products and the people that they wanted to reach. People did want the best. They did want a good quality product. So quality, in a sense, always has been something based in the product, but it's also, for us, it's important that our documentation match that quality standard. And the challenge that we have these days is that many times we have to document far more complex products. We're not documenting how to turn on a washing machine. We're documenting, how to configure a complex system. And maybe the quality might not be as clear there, but we have to make sure that what we document is as clear as possible, because sometimes we may have to provide more hand-holding than the product will by itself. Now, quality is, something that is not easily attainable. It's often attained through repetitive work, through testing, and through repeated failures. Now, if you've seen the movie The Right Stuff, and I highly recommend it, it's a fascinating study about the Mercury space program in the late 50s and early 60s. They talked about, once the program was announced, they talked about trying to get a rocket designed that would work, that they could mount the space capsule on and shoot it up into space. They had failure after failure. And there are a couple of scenes in this movie where the rockets, they either won't start at all, they'll launch a few hundred feet and then they'll explode. I mean, it was just a mess. They had to do this over and over and over again. And they had to just keep testing it until they finally got a rocket that worked. And in 1961, the Redstone rocket pushed Alan Shepard into space, and he was our first astronaut into space. But it didn't happen without a lot of repetitive work and failure. And unfortunately, quality, if it's not attended to, can have some tragic consequences, because later on in the space program, we did have some tragic incidents that resulted in death. So quality is a very serious thing. And for us, we can be partners in quality by making sure that our information is clear and accurate all of the time. Now, quality has also been a corporate value in some stages in American corporate history. For example, in the 1980s, Dr. Edwards Deming, he had a quality management program with 14 points, and I will share this with you in the handout when you get it. But he talked about what makes quality, about people working together, backing each other up, not being afraid to try something new and just test it over and over again until it's right. And during the 1980s, especially in Japan, there was a concept called quality circles, where small groups of people would get together and, talk about how to make a product better, how to make it reliable. Now, unfortunately, quality circles didn't really catch on in the United States as well as they did in Japan, because it was hard for managers to see this as, a democratic process. So quality circles really didn't catch on, and they kind of devolved and faded out of the picture later in the 20th century, and you don't hear much about quality circles in the 21st century. But the concept of people talking about quality and working together to attain quality is really just as valuable as ever. And as far as our role, this is where if we can get involved in product teams and cross-functional teams as early as possible with our ability to empathize with users, we can actually have an influence on quality. We can ask the important questions. And one question that relates very, very highly to quality is asking why. And I recommend to any technical communicator, never stop asking why. If something does not make sense or is not clear to you, it's probably because you don't know why. So why is the number one question to ask. Now, innovation is a little bit more of a challenge because I looked up the dictionary definition of innovation, and it's Oxford American Dictionary defines it as to make changes in something established, especially by introducing new methods, ideas, or products. And when you look at the history of technology and engineering and science, especially in the United States, we have had a number of incredible innovators. Thomas Edison, Charles Goodyear, George Westinghouse, all of these people were amazing innovators, but they really did not think of themselves as innovators. And that word actually wasn't, in previous decades, was not as used as prolifically as it is today. For example, when George Westinghouse, he had over 100 patents, and his driving force was he wanted to make things safer, and he became fascinated by the railroad industry. He wanted to make a better air brake because at one point, to stop a train, the brakeman had to go on top of the train and walk to the back and stop the train. But Westinghouse's invention enabled quicker, safer air brakes on the trains. And those air brakes, that technology has been used to this very day. So George Westinghouse really made incredible contributions to transportation. But at the same time, he was very, very humble. And all of the companies that he formed to manufacture and sell the products that he made, he treated people with great dignity and respect because he believed that people who are treated with respect will make better products. So, but I don't think he considered himself an innovator. So that's the real challenge now, because today, innovation tends to have a little bit more glamour attached to it. For example, the iPhone, which I absolutely love, is a wonderful innovation, but it has a little bit more emphasis on, just kind of the excitement of it and the convenience of it. It's not quite as fundamental as something like a light bulb or, an air brake on a train. So we have to kind of be cautious when we think about innovation, because for us, innovation needs to be something very fundamental. If there's a new tool for us to document a product, that tool really, it might be incredibly innovative. It might have a lot of bells and whistles, but if it doesn't help us with our basic goal of producing clear and accurate communication in a way that's, efficient for both us and for our customer, then, innovation, the value of it is kind of diluted. So, when you think about innovation today, you have to kind of take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. Think about the fundamental purpose of any product. And if the innovation helps make that product better, if it helps make people's lives better, then that the value in the innovation is enhanced greatly. But, some things might be called innovative, but they're more flash than substance. So you just have to kind of kind of cast a cold eye on the discussions of innovation. You have to kind of think about what it really means in terms of overall value. Now, design is another thing that's sometimes can be problematic as a concept, because for years and years, design was considered, in terms of technical specifications. For example, when the Golden Gate Bridge was built, there were several designs that were offered, and a lot of people thought that the Golden Gate Bridge could never be built. It would just be impossible. So finally, someone came up with a design that enabled the builders to meet the challenges of building a bridge in a cold and windy climate where the terrain was very rough. They would have to go underwater, and it required a very deliberate and careful design. And so the aesthetics were all above the water, because they wanted the bridge to look nice, because it was going to have be part of the city landscape. But the most important part was that the bridge withstood the elements and that it would last. So when we think about design today, sometimes the aesthetics can take a little bit more precedence. For example, I remember hearing about a designer at Apple. He was saying he wanted to design an iPhone that was as thin as a credit card. Well, I don't know. If you can do it, fine. But what is the value there? How long is that going to last? What's the enduring value of that? So you just, once again, when you think of design, there are many ways that you can go with it, and you just kind of have to think about what all that means in general. And as far as design for us as technical communicators, the design means that users can use our products and use the product in a way that makes sense. The way we design documents provides an essential roadmap for users to get a job done. So for us, design is definitely, yes, it can be aesthetics, but the aesthetics are often a result of a good analysis of what the user sees on a page and whether they can read it effectively and quickly. So once again, design it's not as simple as you think it is, but it's also important. So when you think about innovation and quality and design, it's possible that, quality can be possible with both innovation, but quality can be possible without innovation. Because if you make something better, even if it's not in an exciting, visual, innovative way, it's still quality. And so the big question is innovation possible without quality? Can you make something that is considered innovative, but really doesn't add any value? So these are the things that these are the questions that we have to ask. And in terms of our own work, we have to ask these questions too, because if there's a new delivery outlet for us, is that really going to help our users? Is it truly innovative in that sense? So these are just some of the questions that will come up throughout your careers. So the takeaways here are always to consider the context when you hear these terms. And keep in mind that sometimes these concepts don't always intersect. Quality may not require innovation. Innovation may not guarantee quality. And when it comes to doing things better, especially in terms of quality, don't be afraid of boredom. Sometimes achieving quality can be a very boring, repetitive process. And you're going to find this. You're going to, try one thing, doesn't work, throw it out, try something else. So that's going to be something that is going to be part of your career. I have lost count of the number of times I've tried one approach, had to throw it out, and tried another one. So sometimes you just have to keep at it. So now let's talk about how all of this affects the generations, because most of us are probably going to be working with multiple generations. You could be working with up to 5 generations. I myself am of the baby boomer generation. You know, I was born before 1964. And I work right now with people of probably at least 3 generations. I work with Generation X, who were born late 60s and 70s, millennials who were born in the 1980s and early 1990s, and now the upcoming Generation Z, who are new college graduates. Behind them is going to be Generation Alpha. These are the people that were born after 2010. So let's take a look at what all this means. First of all, I think for the first time, at least in my lifetime, there has been more emphasis on generational differences than ever before. I have never encountered more analysis of generations than I have in recent years, because when my parents were growing up, you know, they grew up in the 1950s, and they, you know, they didn't think much about generation. They never used the G word, and you know, they just, you know, started out, you know, raising their families, and then, you know, just going through life. And I think it was when we were children that we started hearing about the younger generation versus the older generation. And, you know, my grandmother didn't know what that meant. Unfortunately, what happens is that the differences between generations often takes precedence over what unites us. And sometimes the discussion can become quite contentious. In recent years, for example, we're hearing a lot about, you know, baby boomers versus millennials versus Generation X. And what's sad about that is that, you know, there's some blame that sometimes comes up. Well, your generation doesn't understand this. You caused this that's making life hard for us. Or, you know, in reverse, you don't understand what we went through, you know. And unfortunately, what happens is that the generations, these differences tend to spill over into our work as technical communicators. And there may be more emphasis than there should be on the fact that, you know, generations are different. Now, in some cases, that's important to us. For example, when we're analyzing our audiences, you know, if we're writing for a generation of people over age 40, there are certain physical differences. For example, most people over age 40 have presbyopia, where they, you know, their vision, their near-term vision is somewhat limited. And that's not, you know, that's not anything we can do anything about. You know, that's just a fact. That's just how the human body works. But if your primary audience is of this generation, you may have to consider how you're going to lay things out on a page, what type sizes you're going to use. And that's all right. Where the problem comes in is what assumptions are being made about the technical abilities or the interest in technology among the generations. And that sometimes becomes a flashpoint in the workplace. I remember, like, when right around the 1990s, I started hearing about, you know, the digital generation, digital natives. And there was a phrase, especially when the web caught on, that was going around the internet. Can you teach my father how to use the internet? And I thought that was interesting, because the idea was that the internet is something that younger people are very comfortable with, but older people are not. And I couldn't help thinking about my father. You know, he died before the PC or the Mac or the internet even existed. But he was the quintessential early adopter. And if he had lived to see the Mac, he would have gone right out. He would have outfitted his entire office. He owned a small business. He would have filled them up with Macs and had all of his sales staff use Macs. When Xerox designed their first very compact desktop copier, my father went right out and got one. He was the only person in his business community that had one. And he thought that was really cool. And he couldn't wait to show his family how it worked. In fact, when I got a report card, he took it to his office, made a copy of my report card, brought it home, and said, look at this. And we were used to old-fashioned photostats. And here was a real, genuine photographic copy. And my father thought that was the coolest thing. So when I hear this phrase, can you teach my father how to use the internet? It's like, I'm tempted to say, well, I don't know, but my father can teach you how to use the internet, because I think he would have loved all of the technology that's available today. So it's important to understand that technology itself is not a respecter of age. It's really, a function of people, feeling comfortable with it. And once they do, it doesn't matter how old they are. And we have to be very, very careful about the assumptions that we make about which generation adopts which technology. Now, there are some things that maybe younger people are more interested in, and that's fine. But as technical communicators who document technical products, we need to be very mindful of any assumptions that we're making about what the generations are interested in, what they need, and what they want. So, you're going to see a lot throughout your careers. You're going to see a lot of this type of analysis. Like here's, baby boomers, Gen X. Here's, some things. Now here's, like, for example, over here, tech savviness. They say 4% for boomers, 16% for Gen X, and 78% for millennials. Well, there might be some truth in that, but once again, you never know, and you just have to check your assumptions very carefully. Because I think of a friend of mine who gave her 101-year-old grandfather an iPad for his birthday. He was pestering her to get him one. He said, I want that machine. And when she gave it to him, he absolutely loved it. He was watching movies, he was doing all kinds of stuff with it. So you just never know. So the takeaways here are that every generation, yes, there are differences, but every generation has a valuable history. And we talked, before the presentation started, we talked about, DVDs and floppy disks, and we're probably all very glad that those things, we don't have to use them anymore. But that really isn't tied to a generation. Anybody can, appreciate the value of being able to store things online. That's no respecter of any generation. It doesn't matter whether you're 70 or 20, if you have that convenience, it's going to be valuable to you. So it's important for us to understand what unites us provides as many insights as what separates us. So for my older colleagues, I always recommend tell your story, because our profession has a fascinating history. We didn't, many, many years ago, we didn't have the exciting tools that we have today, but we worked on so many exciting things. If you look at the history of the space program, for example, there was tons of documentation to get those early rockets off the ground. And the astronauts needed lots and lots of procedures written. And fortunately, a lot of that material is being digitized and is becoming available on PDF. And it is truly fascinating. And that is part of our history as technical communicators. And it's worth exploring. I for a presentation I did at work, I found a copy of an old user's manual for a 1955 Chevrolet, and I can't remember what I did with it. If I can find that photograph, I'll include it in the handout. But the instructions were so clear and straightforward, and I thought, this was from like almost 60 years ago, but this is good documentation. So, it was no respecter of generations. So it's important for us to understand that there are certain things about our profession that are valuable no matter who we are, no matter how old we are, or no matter where we came from. So in the sense, we are many and we are one. our differences strengthen us, but they matter not at all at the same time. So if you are working with multiple generations, as you probably will be, try to see what the good things about those different generations and help them to understand what is good about your generation. Because if we can emphasize the good, then we can all work together and we can build this profession. Now, I want to just close with a quote that inspires me almost every day. Now, I've talked about the space program many times, so you can probably guess I'm quite a space program enthusiast. Now, in 1961, President Kennedy was really pushing for us to set a goal to land someone on the moon. And you might have heard parts of what are known as his moon speech. And in your handout, I will provide a video link to that because it's a fascinating speech. But I want to read one part of that speech to you. I wish I could have just shared President Kennedy's recording, but I wasn't sure whether that would be, some kind of a copyright problem. So you're going to have to hear my voice instead. So here we go. This is what he said about the moon mission. Even though I realize that this is, in some measure, an act of faith and vision, for we do not now know what benefits await us. But if I were to say, my fellow citizens, that we shall send to the moon 240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, fitted together with a precision better than the finest watch, carrying all the equipment needed for propulsion, guidance, control, communications, food, and survival, on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body, and then return it safely to Earth, re-entering the atmosphere at speeds of over 25,000 miles per hour, causing heat half that of the temperature of the sun. And do all of this, and do it right, and do it first. Before this decade is out, we must be bold. I just love this quote, because we truly must be bold to advance our profession, to make it better, to invite others to join us, to improve the quality of life. And we can do it because you are entering a profession that matters and your value will endure. So be bold and fly high, and God go with you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Lori. That was excellent. And it was so great to hear from you and just all of your insight.
So, I'm open to comments, discussion, anything.
Yeah, feel free to ask any questions in the chat or over the mic. I guess I have one to start off.
Oh, sure.
So even currently, technology is always evolving and new technology being made each day. What tips might you have for a current technical communicator to keep up with it all?
Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, just kind of keep abreast of what is happening. When you hear about a tool, kind of filter it through your own experience, and ask what does this matter to me? What can I learn about this tool? Why is it relevant to me? And I think that one of the things that's kind of a challenge is you're going to hear a lot about trends. Well, there's a trend toward this, or there's a trend, toward that. But so it's important to kind of look forward and look backwards. For example, a tool like the iPhone has been around for almost more than 10 years now. And so that's probably a tool that's going to have some lasting value. There are other things that may not have as much lasting value. So I think it's just a good idea to keep your eyes and ears open when you hear conversations about tools with other people. Just, I would probably just keep some notes. Maybe if you use Evernote or some other journaling tool, keep a record of the things that you hear about, and then ask about them, and take a look at, see if you can get your hands on some demos, or free downloads or something, and just try it out. You don't have to keep using it if it doesn't work for you. But if you try a tool and it does not work for you, make a note of that too, because that's valuable information. That can help you increase your user empathy.
All right, thank you very much.
Anything else?
Hello, Ms. Meyer. I just wanted to know if you happen to have a LinkedIn page.
Yes, I am on LinkedIn, so please feel free. In fact, maybe I better advance my slides here. Here's my contact information. I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn, so please do feel free to connect if you'd like, and you can follow me on Twitter. I'd be more than happy to have that. I'm also on Discord. I just haven't set it up yet. I just now logged on, but I'll get more involved in that as soon as I get it set up.
You'll get the hang of that soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I will get connected with you.
Sure. Yeah, please do. Yeah.
I can share those links in the chat too, or our Discord chat, just so everybody can have the opportunity to connect. That would be great.
Sure.
Lori.
Sure.
This is Jessica, and it's related to the last question. And I'm an experienced writer, but I was curious because when you mentioned about new tools, you've been around long enough to have seen some fads come and go.
Oh,
I would just be for me, the latest one in Flair was TopNav. We're going to do TopNav, and I couldn't make any sense of it. And so I said, this will go away. And sure enough, SideNav came out, and now SideNav is everything that they're doing because it just TopNav is too hard. I'm sorry, I'm speaking in code. I'm just
my ultimate. Yeah, go ahead.
No, my ultimate question is just maybe some advice for new writers, because one of the things that took me a long time to learn was how to spot something that's a fad. I didn't fall for the TopNav thing, and I know a lot of people did, and gosh, that was a lot of work. I'm sure I was just curious.
Well, one of the things that I found helpful is I don't pay as much attention to what's the current trend or what's on the bleeding edge right now. Not that I don't care about innovation or making things better, but part of the problem is that you can find yourself in a tug of war. TopNav versus SideNav, and I know exactly what you're talking about because I've heard these discussions before. Fortunately, for me, I haven't had to actually get into a situation where I've had to defend one method as opposed to another. But I think the most important thing is, as technical communicators, we are writing for people who need to get work done. So what works best for them? If it's TopNav, we have to figure out, for example, why would that be the best solution for these users? Does it help them find information quicker? Does it help them read the information in an easier way? So those are the sorts of things that are more important than, what's the current, whatever the current popular method is. So if you can focus, that's why I was talking about, being the first believers, being user advocates, and spreading the concept of user advocacy beyond ourselves, because I think that might help kind of dilute some of this thing about, well, should we do, this way, or try pain or no pain, or, because those are just results. What you're after is what works best for our users, what helps them get the information that they need in a quick and efficient way, and helps them get their work done and help them to move on. For example, one of the things that it doesn't matter what your layout is or anything else, people have to find things, be able to find things. So I'm a big one on if there are paper manuals involved to index them. Anything over 10 pages I index. Not that, you know, a 12-page document doesn't seem like it should have an index, but it gets one anyway, because people, they do search. And, you know, one thing that we found out is that sometimes people will go outside of their company's documentation if they're, you know, if you're documenting a product that's kind of used in the industry in general, and they can't find information in your particular product's documentation, they'll go out and do a Google search. And that's not necessarily bad, but the problem is that they may be doing that because they can't find what they want in your documentation, and that's a concern. So, you know, can they use it? Can they find it? Can they read it? Can they get their job done? Those are the important questions.
Hi, Lori. This is Amy Toole.
Hi.
I don't have a specific question, but I did want to just comment and say I appreciate what you shared today. It has helped to maybe cut through some of the noise. I could see myself getting distracted by things like trends or fads, and so I've made a lot of notes about what I hear from you is to say to keep coming back to what works for the user. And I hear a lot of empathy when you're describing the user, how we can be first believers, and how even across generations, just to continually think about how we can put ourselves in somebody else's position. So I appreciate everything that you've shared today, and you've given me a lot to think about.
Oh, thank you. I'm really glad. Thanks so much for your feedback. You know, one other thing that I didn't mention in the main presentation was there has been a trend, and I think it's leveling off a little bit now, but I think when social media really kind of started to explode in the early 21st century, that there was more of an emphasis on user interaction in the documentation, making documentation more, you know, of a two-way conversation. And in some ways, that's good because we definitely want to hear from our users, especially if there's something that they need that we can provide in a better way. But one of the less fortunate results of that has been the explosive growth of a lot of community forums. And some companies are kind of nudging users over to these community forums to get information. And this can be extremely frustrating because if a user is in trouble, if they have a question they can't answer, if they need to get something done and they're stuck, a forum could be the last place that they're going to get the help they need. Because if you look at community forums, a lot of times, you know, there'll be a lot of conversation. Oh yeah, I tried that. Oh yeah, me too. Oh, well, I tried this. And it's like, no, that's not what the user wants. They just want to know, I'm trying to do step 3 and I can't do it. Get me out of this jam. You know, so, you know, there is, you know, there has been a trend towards some, you know, more forums that are more conversationally based, but you have to be really careful. That can't be your only outlet for user assistance. So I tend to advise people to proceed with great caution if they, you know, if they're, you know, being encouraged to, you know, have more community or conversational type documentation, because, you know, you have to be as direct as possible. So there might be a place for some conversational forums, but they do not work in every aspect of a user's experience. So you just have to be careful. Anything else?
I believe that might be it for questions. No more in the chat so far.
Okay. Well, once again, you know, please feel free to connect with me, and it's been a pleasure to have you here, and it's been a pleasure to speak with you. I'm really glad I had a chance to do this, and I wish you all the best. I know you're gonna do great, all of you.
Yeah, thank you, Lori. And it was such a pleasure having you with us. That was an amazing presentation, and like certainly that everybody here gained something from that tonight. And it's always good to just widen our perspectives on topics like this. So thank you again.
Oh, you're entirely welcome. And John, I will send you a PDF for the handout. So.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Yeah, and you know, I can share the slides if you like. You know, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be good too. Any materials you'd like to send my way, I can distribute it to all our members.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll try to wrap that up over the weekend and get that out to you early next week.
Okay, perfect. But yeah, once again, just thank you so much, and thank you to
You're
everybody
welcome.
and thank you to everybody who came out today too. And we hope that you just learned something from this presentation. And as Lori said, feel free to contact her. Her information is up there because she'd be happy to just hear from you and answer your questions or just provide her expertise. So again, thank you to everybody.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody. Lori, that was really great. Thanks for all the space references.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, I'm always happy to talk about that. Thanks again.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you could come. Thanks so much.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Okay, thanks.
Good night. Have a good weekend.
Everybody.
Good night.